Zilba here. I hope everyone watching this video knows Seele is crazy strong, a top tier DPS, but if you don't, I'll be showing you exactly why in this complete guide to Seele. She destroys single target enemies, but her talent cheats the game mechanics and enables extra turns that make AoE fights no problem, even benefiting her more than a full single target stage. Are you pulling for Seele on her rerun, or maybe some Eidolons or her Lycone? Let me know below. I'll be going through her stats, abilities and how to max her damage and why her kit is so strong, traces and her amazing Eidolons, as well as how much damage increase they provide. I'll then rank her best Lycones and Relics, whilst explaining what stats you want on her, including speed. We'll then finish with Synergies and team compositions. If you like this guide, let me know with a like and consider subbing if you want to catch my next guides. Lots to come. Anyway, let's begin. Seele is a Quantum 5-star limited unit hypercarry. She was our first limited 5-star and will be rerunning in the second half of 1.4. She follows the Hunt path, a path dedicated to single target damage. Seele, however, won't care about that stereotype and gains extra turns upon killing enemies. She also has great self buffs, including a buff state that makes those attacks so much stronger. You want to max her skill first and then her ult and talent. Her basics can be important too for her extra turns, and you definitely want to max out her traces anyway eventually. At level 80, her base HP is a low 931, but her base attack is a decent 640. She has a very low base defense of 363, but then the highest speed in the game as of recording at 115. A true glass cannon. She has an energy cost of 120, and as a hunt unit, she luckily has the least amount of chance of being hit among paths. So let's check out her abilities and how her talent really works, as well as some gameplay tips to enhance her damage to the max. Let's start with her long talent, Resurgence. Upon defeating an enemy with her basic, skill or ultimate, she will receive an extra turn as well as enter her buff state. These are two different things. The buff state will grant her a large damage percent boost for one turn, as well as resistance penetration after unlocking her A4. This extra turn is her Resurgence state, and it's indicated by her different idle pose as well as her UI icon shining. This state is an extra turn and thus will not consume buff durations, which is pretty crazy, meaning a 1-turn buff from Brony's skill will take effect for Seele's first skill and this extra Resurgence attack and tick down after this Resurgence attack. Now mechanics that cause an extra action but don't actually end your turn, like Blade's skill and QQ's skill, allow you to extend buff durations. This is the same for Resurgence, except unlike during Blade and Xing Shui's turn after using a skill, you cannot use any ultimates during Resurgence. So the way to extend buffs is to instead ult during Seele's attacking animation and pray that the hit will in fact defeat the enemy. Then the buffs will activate during her extra turn state and the buffs will not tick down and will thus be extended by a turn. This also works for her own damage percent buff and resistance penetration, meaning after a kill and your Resurgence action, the action you do on your next turn will also have this big buff. Finally, you can have a double Resurgence if you activate your ultimate before you enter the Resurgence state and kill a second enemy with it. And yes, your buffs will still carry on since your turn hasn't technically ended yet. Just remember that you can't get a Resurgence activation if you kill a unit in Resurgence, so you'll want to use that Resurgence turn to deal damage to the highest priority enemy. So now onto her basic attack, Thwack, which is a standard basic attack, dealing a normal amount of damage to a single enemy, dealing 30 toughness damage and regenerating 20 energy and a skill point. She will actually end up using some basics on weak enemies to enter her Resurgence state and saving some skill points. Her skill, Sheathed Blade, will increase Seele's speed by 25% for 2 turns, and then deal a large amount of damage to a single target. This speed boost buffs her base speed, as it's a percentage, bringing her speed before main stats and substats to 143.75 speed. This will be up permanently if you're not doing a meme Seele build. This will do 60 toughness damage, consume a skill point, and regen 30 energy. Her ultimate, Butterfly Flurry, is everyone's favourite ultimate, where Seele describes what this fruit is. She'll enter the buff state, so she'll gain that large damage percent boost and resistance penetration, not the extra turn, and then deal a massive amount of damage to a single target which will benefit from this damage percent buff. This buff is special and will not tick down at the end of her turn if it's applied during it, but will tick down the next turn after it's applied. So if you ult outside your turn, unless it's an emergency, then it'll lose you value. Ulting at the start of your turn lets your skill gain the large damage percent buff and res pen, as well as the skill on your next turn, rather than just one skill if you ult at a different time. So I would either ult at the start of your turn if possible, or after your skill provided you have a good reason, like killing the enemy, or you have tons of buffs stacked up. Finally, her technique, Phantom Illusion, is an enhanced technique and requires an attack to activate the buffs in combat, so use buffing techniques before it. You'll gain stealth for 20 seconds when using it, which makes enemies clueless and they won't spot you. When attacking during this stealth, you'll enter the buff state for 1 turn. This is useful for a good first turn of damage. So after all that juicy info, let's see her traces. Her first Sentry passive reduces the chance of being attacked when Seele is under half HP. This is great for those low base defensive stats, and nice for your tank to have higher aggro chance on top. Her second passive gives her the res pen we talked about before. You'll get 20% during your buff state attacks. Resistance is a separate multiplier to crit, damage percent, etc, so this is very strong to have. If you're against quantum weak enemies, so you have a multiplier of 1, you instead have 1.2 during your buffed attacks, meaning a 20% straight damage increase. Enemies have resistance to your element when they're not weak to you, so this also allows Seele to brute force non-quantum weak enemies on top of quantum weak ones, a bit OP for a passive. Finally, after using a basic attack, her third passive will let her next action be advanced forward by 20%, which is like the awesome multiplication light cone, but in an Ascension passive. It means you will take your next turn 1.25 times faster. It means when she is using those basic attacks combined with her high base speed and big speed buffs, she will be back very soon to do some more damage, unlike other DPS that will take a while to take their next turn. This also works just fine with her Resurgence. Because it's an extra turn, it won't consume this advance forward, so if you basic before you enter Resurgence or basic attack during it, you'll still have your next turn advanced. Seele's trace bonuses grant her 28% attack, which is always nice, 24% crit damage, we'll take that, thank you very much, and 12.5% defense, which, honestly, she might need sometimes without Fushuan. Now let's quickly just see how strong these Eidolons are, since a bunch might want to pull some for their Seele during her rerun. Her E1 grants 15% crit rate versus enemies under 80% HP. She's an executioner type character, so this is great for getting Resurgence, as well as just doing tons more damage in general. Though it's not too great in practice since you'll be attacking weak enemies when they're at full HP, since you're always going to have the first turn. Also, since it's not a buff in the stat page, this won't count for Rutilant or Inert Planar Ornament sets, but this Eidolon will grant Seele an 8.4% DPS increase in an ideal scenario, so less in actual practice. Her E2, however, is much better. It will let her stack her skill speed buff 2 times now, so she can self-buff by 50% speed, the highest speed buff in the game, and bringing her to 172.5 speed before Relics. In my rotation, I got an extra 2 skills and an ultimate from this giant speed increase, and it was within the night which benefited from that extra speed stack. So she gained a 24% DPS increase. It won't mean more damage per turn, but it will mean way more turns to dish out that damage. Her E3 buffs 2 core parts of her damage for a 9% DPS increase. Her E4 grants 15 energy per kill, bumping up kill energy from 10 to 25. To calculate this, I reduced her 4-turn rotation to 3 turns. The base rotation shouldn't be 4 turns in actual play, but it is a standard rotation that doesn't normally count kills. So this granted an additional ult in my rotation as well as another buff state skill for a 17% DPS increase. The actual increase varies in practice. Her E5 is the weakest at a 3.5% DPS increase from buffing her ultimate. Finally, her E6 makes the target you ulted receive a butterfly flurry effect. Every time they are attacked by Seele's allies, which counts full attacks, not hits, they'll take 15% of Seele's ultimate damage, which is pretty massive. If the enemy dies to this flurry effect though, Seele won't enter Resurgence from it. I added 3 ally attacks per ult, giving every ult an extra 45% of its damage. This number can be bigger or smaller depending on your rotation, but with 3 ally hits per ult, since they'll go after Seele, this is a 20% DPS increase. But this is counting that the enemy won't die, which they probably will by this point, so the DPS increase is theoretical. So what are her best relics? Obviously the quantum set, without a doubt. Versus quantum weak enemies or non-quantum weak, you'll gain the quantum damage percent that she can use, unlike some DPS that run quantum set as an off-element set. And then of course the big defense ignore bonus, beating any other set. 2 Musk, 2 Quantum is fine for her until you've farmed 4-piece Quantum, but I would get farming. For planar ornaments, her best is the Rutilant Arena set. Inert and Spacing Station are a bit weaker, but usable. We also get a new world in 1.5 if we're following Genshin scheduling, so maybe Seele will get new relics or planars, I'll update you guys if so. For main stats, you want to go for a crit body, maintaining a good crit ratio. I prefer more crit rate since she has a 1-hit ultimate though, and killing is important for her playstyle. Go attack percent boots, quantum damage percent orb, and attack percent rope. Speed boots are technically an option for in the night players in the early game, but should be replaced very quickly when you get good attack percent boots. The subsets focus on crit and attack, and then some speed if you're using in the night. At 115 base speed and a 25% speed buff, she puts herself at 143.75 speed before relics. This means she fulfills 4 out of 6 in the night stacks already. So you'd want 7 speed in substats or 122 speed before the fight to get to 5 stacks. You want 17 speed in substats if you want that 6th stack, or 132 speed out of combat. But I found it makes your damage worse if you drop attack percent and crit stats for it, even with an extra action. So 122 speed is the way to go. Getting more speed for that 6th stack is not worth the loss in other stats. You also don't need 134 base speed since she self-buffs speed. An ideal stat line at endgame would be 3k attack, an 80 to 160 crit ratio, and specific speed is only needed within the knight, which would be 122 speed. Now onto Lycone rankings. Her best is in the knight of course, being best at 5 stacks unless you can get 6 stacks without compromising your offensive stats. You'll really want this cone if you want Seele to perform. Swordplay is ranked pretty high, but its number is very skewed since I don't change targets in the simulation, so it will be much less than this. Seele wants to hit different targets all the time, so I'd even recommend boat over swordplay. Seele, which is boat, the her to store Lycone, is a good option provided you're killing enemies frequently, which, let's face it, isn't a bad assumption to make anymore, especially on Seele. Just remember the second part of the Lycone passive won't count for Resurgence Arena. Sleep Like the Dead is nice, and from my calculations, you won't even need to drop your crit rate to abuse it, it just won't be as reliable at high crit rate. It will buff your crit rate mid-attack if you don't crit, buffing your subsequent hits. Seele's skill has a hit distribution of 20, 10, 10, 60, so that last hit critting is very good. Since it's a crit rate buff too, it will work for Resurgence Arena. It is RNG though, and again, you'll probably want to pull in the knight. Now that we've discussed her kits and builds, it's on to discussion of her pros and cons. Her pros are pretty lengthy. We have her self buffs. 80% damage, 20% resistance penetration for damage is pretty crazy. We then have her speed and action advance buffs on top of the highest base speed. 25% permanent speed and action advance on basics is why we have memes of her taking 50 turns back to back. Next we have her element. She's quantum and can thus abuse the quantum set best, allowing for even more multiplier increases that aren't normal on other element DPS. We have Resurgence. A unit being able to take extra turns is pretty disgusting. It means as long as you have the damage to nuke an enemy, you can use that enemy to take another action with large damage buffs. Another bonus of Resurgence is its power in extending buff durations. For example, with a buff outside of her turn, you get your first action buffed, and if you kill, you get an extra action with that buff. Then if it's during her action, before you enter Resurgence, you'll not only get that extra action buffed, but you won't consume a ton of this buff when ending your turn. Finally, she has amazing Eidolons too. All of them are pretty big increases outside of E1 and E5, so she kills very well with extra copies for those Seele fans. For cons, we have skill point usage. Of course, DPS should be using skill point, but extra turns means more skill points used. This is also not that bad though, since she can basic and get her turn back very quickly, but it's still a con. We have the speed buffs as a con too. Speed tuning is horrible for Seele and is too scary of a task for even the min-maxiest of min-maxers. We also have single target focus. Despite being very good with weak AoE mobs, if we get content with lots of strong elites packed together, she won't be able to activate her extra turns as easily, but that's just nitpicking. Next we have the Lycone problem. Swordplay shoots very well but isn't great in practice due to her kit gameplay. Stellar C is hard to maximize, and Sleep Like the Dead is RNG. Seele players I discussed with before and during this guide all state that she feels much weaker without in the knight. And this video isn't sponsored by anyone, she of course works without this Lycone. Finally, she might need the most investment out of hype carries because of how she functions. She needs kills to enter Resurgence and double her damage output, so you want to max out her damage as much as possible. Seele is still a top DPS and her kit is just overloaded. If you want a strong DPS that should remain strong for ages due to her talent, then Seele should be a good pickup. She also has some staying power with Mono Quantum, which hasn't even hit its full power yet, but will enable Seele to face any element weak enemy with massive success. Comment below if you still think she's a top DPS. Now on to Synergies. Our first has to be Bronya. Bronya will usually be played skill point neutral with Seele unless you're generating 50 skill points a second, but Bronya's buffs are incredibly strong. A problem, kind of, pre-E6 Bronya is the 1 turn duration of said buffs. This is a problem on some DPS. However, Resurgence will keep these buffs until the end of the Resurgence action, meaning you can get 2 skills worth of Bronya's high damage buff. You also of course can extend Bronya's 2-turn ultimate too, and finally Seele is already taking hundreds of turns and Bronya's action advance will let her do so even more. Next is Silverwolf, of course. She enables pseudo monoquantum, a weak version of monoquantum, and will enable a true monoquantum in the future when we get a quantum harmony. That's a lot of monoquantums. When combining the power of her defense shred, the quantum set activation, Silverwolf's resistance reduction, and Seele's A4 passive, you have a 147% DPS increase to your damage, which is absolutely disgusting. This single target damage amp of course benefits Seele's high single target damage focus, unlike AoE DPS that might want Pella in some situations. Fish1 is another great synergy and her premier solo sustain. The crit rate buff is very great, and the crit damage on top at E1 is delicious. But Seele's low defensive stats really enjoy Fish1 over a healer, since one-shots can happen. Fish 1 can also benefit Seele a tiny bit with her signature Lycon's damage percent, but that is minimal. So for teams, you want to play Seele with 2 Harmonies or 1 Harmony, 1 Nihility and a solo sustain. For Harmony, her best options will be Bronya and Ting Yun. For Nihility, her best options will be Silverwolf and Pella. So we have a pseudo mono quantum, which is Seele, Silverwolf, a quantum sustain, and then you bring a Harmony matching the enemy weakness you're facing. If they're quantum weak, you can bring any Harmony of course. This means versus any enemy, you'll have quantum weakness for maximum Seele damage. There is full mono quantum already with 2 quantum sustain, and it is run a lot, but Fish 1 solo sustains just fine and Links 2 with great investment, so putting them 2 together is just overkill. Real mono quantum will appear when we either get a secondary quantum buffer or some weird quantum sub DPS that works well with Seele. Xingque has been used, but it's not as optimal as say a quantum blade or Arlen could be, but ideally we just wait for a Harmony unit. Hypercarry Seele is great too, with someone like Bronya and Pella with any sustain. The cheapest team would be Links, Seele, Ting Yun, Pella for a weaker hypercarry team, but it should still slap enemies silly. So let me know what your pool plans are and how Seele has been treating you if you got her in 1.0. We have lots of big guides coming, so sub if you want to catch them. Thanks to all my amazing members, thanks for watching and have a Guoba day.